Good evening, and you're very welcome here to our Around the Grounds program here on Finalwhistle.ie. This week, we'll be bringing you all the action from the Premier and First Division, where 6 games went ahead. We had 7 down for decision, but unfortunately, the game between Finn Harps and Drogheda ended up being cancelled due to Storm Eunice within the last couple of hours. Now, the first game that we'll be going to is in the Premier Division, where we will be going to Athlone, where our reporter Sean Crosby was watching the game for us. Sean, please tell us how the game finished out in the end.
I'm actually in Wexford. There was the Wexford Treaty game. Finished 5-1 to Treaty in the end. It was kind of a similar story with Wexford like it was last season. Ian Ryan's men, they started off really strong. They looked a better side in the first couple of minutes, but they just didn't take their chances, and Treaty made them pay for it. A few sloppy mistakes from Brady and goal, and the game kind of just ran away from them then after the first 30 minutes, really.
Perfect, Sean. And we'll say Treaty were a team last year who were, they pushed into the promotion places. They narrowly lost in the semi-final. Are they a team that have impressed you tonight and look like they could go for promotion again based on what you've seen in a game? 5-1 is a fairly high-scoring game to start your season off.
Yeah, no, definitely. They were really impressed me tonight. It was very professional, is kind of how I would describe the performance, especially in the first kind of 20, 30 minutes when Wexford were on top playing quite like sharp football. Treaty managed to weather the storm and kind of started to push on. So they were really impressed. Really impressed me.
I can obviously hear the Wexford fans where you are anyway. They seem to be in good spirits even though they lost 5-1 tonight. Do you reckon it's going to be similar for them this year than it was last year, that they might just be kind of mid to bottom of the table?
If that performance ended to go off, then yes, it's nearly frustrating at times because there is such good football being played, but they just can't seem to take the chances, and it's sloppy mistakes at the back. Like I said, today's performance is very familiar, I'd say, to most Wexford FC fans.
Perfect, Sean. Thank you very much for that report. Next, we will go over to Dundalk, where our reporter Kieran Callum was watching the game between Dundalk and Derry. It was a game that looked to be the standout fixture of the week. How did it play out in the end, Kieran?
It really did play out something like an absolutely frantic pace, an absolutely fantastic game of football, a real good advertisement for two very up-and-coming attacking sides. Dundalk will have questions over their defensive lapses. The 2 goals that they did concede, they conceded pretty much right after they scored. But all in all, there was a lot of questions made of Stephen O'Donnell's signings. They really have come up trumps this evening, particularly debutant Stephen Bradley, a name that wouldn't exactly be the most loved when it comes to Dundalk fans. But this Stephen Bradley came up trumps tonight with a well-worked goal. But one of the things that came out also was that they're attacking from the back. Sam Bone had 4 shots. He nearly had a goal of the season compilation himself here at one stage if any of those shots went in. And Dundalk did take the lead once again, despite the fact conceding by a Joe Thompson late in the first half. They then went back ahead midway through the second half with a pinpoint cross from Robbie Benson, and it was headed in by another debutant, Mark Connolly, who wheeled away in celebration. There was kind of that little bit of a pause there because we weren't sure if he was going to be blown up for a foul, but it was given away. But almost immediately, Derry City went down to the other end. James Akintunde, who caused Dundalk so many headaches when he was playing for Finn Harps last year, he broke down the left, crossed it in, and Jamie McGonigal, who was another really, really potent attacking threat this evening for Derry City, he headed with a low effort to equalise. Jamie McGonigal did have chances near the end to seal the tie, but a draw would be considered a fair result. But Dundalk will have questions. It's going to take them a little while to get themselves up defensively working, but all in all, as an attacking side, they really are going to be a surprise package this season. I think I wouldn't write them off. I'm not going to say they're going to win the title, but I wouldn't say that they're going to be down near the bottom of the end like they were for most of last season.
Perfect, Kieran. And do you reckon that we might have seen a bit of a turn of the tide for Dundalk from what we saw last year, that maybe they could be, you obviously said there they mightn't win the title, but they might be maybe top 4, top 5, would you say?
I'd say top 4, exactly. That's where I think that their target's going to be for this season. I think Stephen O'Donnell, once again, you can see the kind of the style of play that he had at St. Pat's. He's kind of brought that blueprint to Dundalk, and he signed players in order to fit that kind of system that he's looking to play. A lot of questions were in pre-season were made of Nathan Shepherd. I don't think Nathan Shepherd was at fault for either of the goals conceded this evening. I think all in all, this side is very young. It's very dynamic. They're hungry. This game was fire and brimstone at some stages. There was tackles flying in. At one stage, as I mentioned in my report, there was a melee where 4 yellow cards were given, but both sides were really at it tonight. And I think Dundalk are not going to be in any sort of the trouble that they were last year. I think we're starting to see a resurgence. The home crowd, it was a packed, it was sold out in the stand, it was sold out for most of the ground tonight. This Dundalk team and these Dundalk supporters are really back on Stephen O'Donnell.
Perfect, Kieran. Thank you for that report. We will leave Dundalk now. We will go down toward the capital to Tolka Park, where Shelbourne started their new season in the Premier Division after winning the title last year in the First Division. Our reporter, Alana Canan, was watching the game for us. Alana, how did it play out on Damien Duff's first game as the new manager?
Yeah, Diarmuid, there was definitely a lot of hype around it, all right, and that really came to the fore before the match was kicked off. The atmosphere was fantastic and everyone was really looking forward to the game, but in the end, Dara Burns, Mark Doyle and Jason McKenna netted to ensure the Dublin Derby concluded St. Pat's direction. It was kind of a heated affair. There was a lot of, like even Kieran was mentioning there, kind of back and forth between the players, but you'd expect that. And 3-0 the final score. I thought Damien Duff's side were very kind of energetic, and they probably would have felt hard done by as well, because they had a penalty call out of a handball and it was flat out denied. So yeah, a good showing for both sides, but St. Pat's going home with the 3 points.
Do you think that there might be a little bit more in Shelbourne than what we've seen tonight? Obviously, you're going to, you're playing your first game back in the top flight against a team like St. Pat's, who just played Shamrock Rovers in the President's Cup last week. They've also, they come into the game as the current FAI Cup holders. Do you think that it was just baptism of fire for your opening night, and we might see Shelbourne being a bit more competitive as the season kind of wilters on a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair to say, because while they didn't score, they definitely did pose a lot of attack and threat, particularly in the second half. And they did actually, in the first few minutes, they kind of had a dream start before it was ruled out. They got a goal in the first few minutes, and while Tulka Park went into a celebration and there was somersaults and everything being thrown out, it was ultimately ruled out in the end for offside. So yeah, like, they do have that attack and threat and talent, so I'm sure we'll see it in the coming games.
Is there enough in St. Pat's, do you think, to threaten Shamrock Rovers this season?
I think so. Especially just the caliber of the goals tonight were fantastic. Like Dara Burns in particular, like, he's only a teenager, but his strike there tonight was up there with the best of them. He curled it and it went cross goal into the top corner. And if you watch back the goal, you'll see what I'm talking about. It was just phenomenal. But it wasn't just him either. I thought Mark Doyle was very good, and Owen Doyle too. Impressed on his first showing for Pats. But yeah, I think going forward they'll definitely be one to watch, and we'll be looking to put it up there with Shamrock Rovers, like you touched on.
Thank you, Alana, for that report. Now we will finally go back to Athlone, where our other Sean Comer, was watching the game between Athlone and Waterford for us. Sean, I believe it was a high-scoring fixture in the end from the team who were brought down from the Premier Division last year, as they came through the relegation playoffs.
It finished 5-2 here, 7 goals, just one shy of the 4-4 that took place here last year in the cup between these two sides. But in all honesty, 5-2 nearly looked a bit kind on Athlone. Waterford were very, very dominant. So I know that they come in as the bookies' favourites to win the First Division, and those odds won't be changing much after tonight. They were just blistering really from the start. Just under 20 minutes in, Keane Kavanagh gave them the lead from a corner, and 2 minutes later, they got right. Phoenix Patterson got a rebound and put it to 2-0, and then just before half time, Junior Quintero with a left-footed free just outside the box made it 3, and it was pretty clear that there's going to be nothing happening aside from a Waterford win here. Junior got his brace just under 10 minutes into the second half through a brilliant solo effort. Just cut inside and curled it into the bottom corner with his left foot. Stephen Kearney made it 4-1. With about 3 goals came in the last 10-15 minutes here. Stephen Kearney made it 4-1 after with a shot just outside the box. to give Athlone what looked like a consolation, but then substitute Lewis Bitton scored in an open goal just 2 minutes after that. Athlone won a penalty then with about 5 minutes to go. Glenn McCauley won it, very similar to the cup fixture here last year actually, where Glenn McCauley won 2 penalties and slotted them away, and he slotted that one to make it 5-2, and that's how it finished here.
Perfect, Sean. And are Waterford looking like a team that you'd expect under someone like Ian Morris, who picked up the first division title with Shells last year? Has he kind of put his blueprint into the team based on what you've seen tonight?
It would appear so now. Obviously, only time will tell, but if this one game is anything to go off, it looks like Ian Morris could easily be lifting another first division title at the end of this season. Waterford look re-energised, given how they went down last year with a really bizarre end to the season, obviously with the sacking of Ian Burkham, and I think that left a bad taste in the mouth of Waterford fans and anyone involved with the club. But I think that bad feeling is going to be put behind them very soon if performances like that are being put out every week.
And touching then on Athlone, you mentioned at the start of your report that the 2 goals might have been a bit kind for them to score maybe, and even the 5 that they conceded was a bit kind as well. Did they look fairly out of shape for their opening game? Is it a bad thing to go into an opening game and you come out with a 5-2 loss when it probably could have been more in the end?
I mean, it might be now. The thing with Athlone is obviously they have a new manager in Martin Russell, and it's the first time Russell is taking a team in 3 years. He last managed in 2018, and they're a fairly new squad. They brought in a lot of young players. There's not many left over from last season, and it'll take time for them to gel. But they won't be able to go out and play like that. Whether it's hard to know whether it was Athlone's inexperience out there or Waterford just looking blistering. But I wouldn't say it's a good omen for Athlone what happened tonight.
And we'll say they look like the bookies' favourites. Do you reckon they'll just walk it, or do you think that maybe midway through the season with injuries they might lose a couple of players that we might see Waterford struggling later on down the line?
I mean, all we can do is wait and see. If they manage to keep a fully fit squad, it's hard to see anyone else challenging them.
Perfect, Sean. Thank you for that report. Now we will switch from soccer for a few minutes and talk about rugby. Now, we weren't covering Munster's game in the United Rugby Championship tonight, similar to what you've seen with a couple of reporters based at those grounds. Munster, of course, picked up a 34-20-point win against Edinburgh in the URC tonight. Simon Zebo getting a hat-trick of tries in that win. That is a much-needed win for Munster, as it gives them a big boost, as they've had a dip of form pretty recently, in the URC. And of course, this weekend as well, we will also see Leinster in action tomorrow. They are playing at the RDS, and we'll also have Ulster in action on Sunday. They travel to Wales in that one. And next week, then we will have, of course, more of these games. But yeah, just to touch on those games as a whole, anyway, we have a lot of games, to be honest, tonight in that. We are currently waiting on 2 more games to come through to us. They would be the game between Shamrock Rovers and UCD, which I believe has just finished up within the last few minutes. We also have Bray and Cork, who also kicked off at 7:45 in the first division, but unfortunately, I think there was an incident at halftime that only saw that game coming in. So I believe now we can go to Tala, where our reporter John Parkin was watching the Shamrock Rovers v UCD game for us. UCD, of course, came up via the playoffs. They are going to Tala to take on the champions. It's almost a baptism for fire. How did it work out in the end, John?
Definitely. Well, it looked like early on there might be a bit of complacency from Rovers. Really, they were kind of moving the ball about quite slowly. It looked like they didn't really know what they were doing, and the 2 centre halves for UCD were doing a fantastic job of basically getting on the end of everything. I mean, the one Eric Yoro, he was 17, making his debut. He's a big lad, and he was getting his head on basically everything, blocking everything. But eventually the quality just paid, and it was Sean Hoare who opened the scoring when he finally one of those crosses. Didn't find Yoro or Todd, and then Danny Mandroy, who just before half time really put the nail in the UCD coffin, and with a brilliant header, dived across his marker and just powered it past the keeper. I mean, I don't think if you'd had two keepers in it, it was a fantastic header just out of nowhere. And then they just dominated, and you could tell that UCD, they had a lot of kind of youthful exuberance, but they kind of lost their legs a bit in the second half, and they were making mistakes. I mean, Yoro and Todd went from a defensive wall to suddenly more like a colander, and they were just giving away chances, poor passes here. I mean, and then a third was added by Graham Burke, who came off the bench when Todd gave the ball away in pretty shambolic fashion, and he's supposed to be one of the more experienced players for UCD. So not looking good for UCD particularly, but Shamrock Rovers showing their quality and showing why they were champions last season.
Did it look like a fairly routine result in the end, John, for Shamrock Rovers?
It did. I mean, as I said, early on, there were a couple of counterattacks. I mean, Kerrigan was probably the best player for UCD. He showed his pace down the right. He kind of got in behind a couple of times. I think it was Farouja down the left for Rovers, and he was pushing very high, so that gave Kerrigan a bit of space to get in there. But then they just kept, overhitting passes on the counter, and then they just seemed like they got a bit frustrated when they missed their chances. So really, it just it kind of fizzled out for them a bit.
One of the big statements, of course, in their final game of last season, they announced the signing of Jack Byrne. I believe he was back tonight in the green and the famous hoop shirts that Shamrock Rovers wear at home. Did he impress you, or was he much on the ball, or did he kind of need a few minutes to kind of get back into League of Ireland football?
I think from minute one he kind of showed that he does have a quality that's a level above a lot of players in the league. His passing, he was popping up all over the pitch, playing passes. He was trying passes that other players would almost be scared to try. He tried an outside of the foot pass in the first half that he did, though it didn't go where it intended, it pinged off and ended up playing in Barry Cotter for a shot. So it's trying these passes that I think will help them really unlock defences and really control the tempo of the play a lot better.
And, for the first game, UCD, a 3-0 loss to Shamrock Rovers, is that a fair result for them, or could it have been even more of a hiding?
I think it could have been worse. It was, I mean, Yoro and Todd kind of they just completely lost the plot in the second half late on. I mean, I think Mandroyu could have had about 4 goals because he was sent through 1-on-1 at least twice in the second half, after the one where Sam Todd he somehow swiped at the ball, missed it, fell over, and then the ball went behind him, and it was just a bit of a calamity show, really. So yeah, a lot to be learned for UCD, but they're young and I'm sure they can improve.
And you say there about improving. I suppose it is the first night. You just want to get your season off to a start and everything like that. Should there be alarm bells ringing that if results like this continue and players keep playing like that they could face relegation again? They could just go straight down again?
Well, I think the aim is obviously just stay up. So if losing 3-0 to the champions and that won the league at ease last season, it's not going to cause too many alarm bells. It will be when it comes to those games against other teams that will be down there, and seeing what they can do in those games. Can the likes of Colin Whelan and Liam Kerrigan bring up the goods when they're needed then?
Perfect, John. Thank you for that report.
Thank you.
We have our final game of the night now, which saw Bray entertain Cork City in the First Division. Another high-scoring contest. It seemed to be the play of the night, really, that the First Division had another goal fest in this one. Watching it for us was Sam Curtin. Sam, in the end, it looked a fairly routine victory for Cork.
Yeah, most certainly was. Now, if you saw the first half, you probably would say otherwise. Very, very scrappy affair, especially for the first 10, 15 minutes or so, which, to be honest with you, was really more known for what was happening off the pitch rather than on it, because the amount of flares, the amount of disruptions from the fan trouble that was happening during the game really was something else for the first 15 or 20 minutes or so. The game was routinely stopped by the referee just due to the fact you had to get so many fans even off the pitch, and just it's something I haven't really seen a huge amount. I guess it's following on this trend from what we saw last season with Waterford and Shamrock Rovers, famously enough, on what the last night of the season, I think it was. So, first 15, 20 minutes or so, not a huge amount really to note on the pitch. But then it really sparked into life for the right reasons on 35 minutes when Dylan McGlade, a former Bray man, of course, lashed onto a long ball, almost Dan Randolph-esque and Shane Long against Germany all those years ago, where a beautiful ball from the goalkeeper Harrington into Dylan McGlade, who slotted it past the keeper to make it 1-0 to Cork City. And it pretty much petered out then for the rest of the half, notably, I guess, Keane Bargery being the main threat really for Cork City, while Bray were kind of happy enough to sit back and play on the break, while Cork were trying to use the wind to their advantage and really pressed high up the pitch. And it's the second half that really proved to bear fruit for them, because really from 56 minutes on, it really it sparked into life. It kept me busy anyway, for sure. I was run off my feet. It's my first night here as well on the Final Whistle, so I'm not sure it was welcome from my point of view, but it was brilliant to watch. 56 minutes. Celtic Loney, Barry Coffey got the first one, and he followed up just minutes later with a brace for him, a header from a corner. So that made it 3-0 at that stage. And then Dylan McGlade added 2 more and bagged his first ever hat-trick for the club. Firstly, a wicket deflection. I think it was off one of the Kilburn, I think, for Bray. And then after that, a beautiful little shot again off his right foot, but deflected off one of the Bray players and in as well. So that was 5-0. And that was all within 4 goals in 5 minutes, in fact. And then from there, things just got bad to worse, really, for Bray. On 75 minutes, Rory Keating, the former Galway man, and netting his first goal for Cork City as well. And from there, really, Bray were just playing for the full-time whistle, and it just kind of petered out then the last few minutes. But the game taking longer than usual, really, unfortunately. I think we'll be talking more about the off-the-field stuff, really, rather than on it. The fire brigade and everything were called, so it really had everything on and off the pitch.
It is a fairly nasty thing to see. Of course, we saw it last year where Shamrock Rovers, of course, were letting off fireworks in the RSC against Waterford, and of course that game was stopped and players were ended up getting hit by it. Did you see anyone, like any players getting anything from supporters, or was it just kind of supporters coming onto the pitch and chucking stuff on? It's funny you say that.
Forgot to mention Dylan McGlade, actually, when he scored his hat-trick, he had a flare thrown at him and it just missed. I'm talking inches here. It missed. He was celebrating after. He was kissing the badge and stuff. That's certainly not an excuse for a supporter to be going try, and take someone out with a flare. Like, these things are. If anyone that's never really seen them being used at a game, especially in the League of Ireland, they've really only come to really, I guess, the phenomenon in the last few months since last season. And I mean, these things are highly flammable as well. You don't want one of those going anywhere near you, and it really was just a matter of inches before it hit his head. So thankfully no one was hurt, but it's definitely something I think we're going to hear about over the next few days, and possibly maybe a ban, a stadium ban or something, because really it's just not acceptable in the game. We're trying to get more people in to watch Irish football now as well, and there's a lot of publicity leading into this season, and just we want to talk about things on the pitch rather than often, so it's sad to have to come on and say that, but hopefully this will be dealt with swiftly, and we can talk more about some of the fantastic football that was on display tonight.
Perfect, Sam. Thank you for your report, and that will be our final reporter of the night. So just to round up the results, it was Dundalk 2, Derry City 2, Shelbourne 0, St. Patrick's Athletic 3, Shamrock Rovers 3, UCD 0. In the first division then, Athlone Town 1, Waterford 5, Bray Wanderers 0, Cork City 6, and Wexford FC 1, Treaty United 5. Now we have 2 more games going ahead tomorrow. In the First Division, Sligo entertain Bohemians, and in the First Division, Longford face Cove Ramblers at 7:30. I think both games kick off there at 7:30. That is all from us this evening at Finalwhistle.ie. Tune in next week for another episode of the Around the Grounds, where we will be reporting on all the games in both the First Division and the Premier Division as well. Stay tuned for us next week, and goodbye.